Welcome back to another episode of the PR Podcast. Today, we have Coach Steve Mares. Coach Steve, he played at LSU, was a junior college guy, also played pro, coached at LSU, was my offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in college for my first 4 years. Someone's got a lot of knowledge and really experience, and now he's in the private business world. Doing fitness training and working with people of all ages, but also athletes. And so, Coach Steve, man, glad to have you. Glad to have you.
Man, glad to have be on here. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Coach. Thanks for coming on. So, Coach, of course, we talk about recruiting. We help a lot of families every year. So, again, thanks for coming on. We wanted to have you kind of give some feedback and guidance and tips and pointers on our recruiting. But first, because you played in college. First of all, you played in college. You played at JUCO. Then you played at LSU. You played professionally. You coached.
I played professionally. I only had a few tryouts. I never quite made it professionally there.
Well, I mean, anything past college is professional. It's a lot of
I'll say that.
A lot of prospects wish they could make it that far. Like myself, I mean, I didn't even make it that far. But you coached at Stillman. You were my offensive coordinator coming in. I remember my first time seeing you. It was like the same time I met Josh. You guys were on the field doing a workout. But with recruiting nowadays, I mean, it hasn't changed much, since you were back in the day. It's the evaluation process. But what was something that you looked for in high school recruits? Like, was it film, metrics? How did you pick and choose your recruits?
At Stillman, it was kind of a different process simply because we were Division II. We didn't have a lot of money. And so we actually had a lot of just networking. Coach Keaton was a head coach there, and he pretty much had a lot of people that he made connections with over the years that continued to send him recruits film. And so he kind of filtered them through me. And kind of through Coach Keaton originally, that's where I started to kind of make my connections. So we really didn't have to recruit too much out of the office. And so everything was more of reaching out to coaches, myself, Coach Keaton, through our connections. And we had a lot of teams actually send us film. Sometimes it was overwhelming amount. So I just spent really a good portion of my day just searching the database, everything that I got, film, thing like that, emails. As far as what we looked for an athlete, we really did try to find an athlete that really could just help us win on the field. Being Division II, is you're not getting the D1 guys. You're not getting a 5, 4-star, 3-star. You're not getting those type of athletes, but you are getting some good athletes a lot of times that just don't make the grades or don't have the SAT scores, things like that. So we were trying to find, first off, can they help us on the field? I wish we were looking for a culture guy, somebody that came in and that fit the culture that we were looking for. But at that point, if we had a guy who would just go in there and do right on the field, do right, off the field, that usually was the win for us. I think that was something we were trying to do, was build a culture there at Stillman. And had we gotten to that point, that was going to be like the next step. Does he fit into our culture, and is he somebody that we can pass on?
Right. So
how many hours, Coach Steve, how many hours would you say, a day? Because I think, people underestimate that is obviously a huge part of the job. When you're going through it, and, when you were at LSU, obviously you were a strength coach there, so you probably weren't involved in a ton of evaluations. But when you were the offensive coordinator and you were, recruiting the majority of prospects on the offensive side of the ball for a Division II program, how many hours a week are you spending watching high school prospects film?
I mean, it was almost as if I wasn't coaching, if I wasn't watching film for the players, for the team, if I wasn't game planning. Almost every second that I had was kind of geared toward that.
So gotcha. Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's why for me, especially nowadays, it's super crucial to do what you have to aggressively send out your film. Would you guys recruit someone differently if a Tuskegee or a Miles already had interest or offered them, or they had other Division II offers? Like, for example, I know you weren't named the coach. They had offered me, and I believe I committed. Yeah, I committed before you were on staff, like a week or two before.
Right.
But let's say you're recruiting me back in the day, and we're having conversations. How would you how would you feel, or how would you treat my recruiting experience differently if you had knew that I had five or six other schools that were really interested, maybe a couple other offers? How important was that?
And that was the thing with Stillman. We were different because we didn't have a lot of money at that school, particularly.
Yeah, yeah.
There were certain players that we actually did want to go after, but Coach Keaton being a little bit more experienced than me, sometimes we just kind of knew when to kind of like step back and just not even worry about a particular recruit. We just knew that, listen, we probably weren't going to get them because of the lack of funds that we didn't have, the
Hmm.
facilities that we didn't. And so we kind of were playing behind the eight ball a lot of times. So we were trying to go after guys with a chip on the shoulder, guys that other schools were kind of passing. And so we were kind of going after some of those type of players and recruits.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Coach, one of the questions I had was, so in recruiting, right? Obviously, everybody can't start, right? So you talk about funding and getting a kid to want to come. If you know a kid can't start, right? How do you entice him to come while still at the same time being honest with him about setting expectations? Like, hey, you probably won't play right away here. You can probably play, maybe your sophomore, junior year, but you still need him to get depth, right? You still need depth. How do you do that as a coaching staff?
That's a good question.
Back then or now? Because I mean, it's different with the NIL, with the transfer rules, with the portal, things like that. So you kind of talking a little bit more now how I would go about it
Yeah, how would you approach
today.
that right now? Yeah.
I think today, I mean, I think definitely the athletes have a lot more power, which is I think it's a plus for them because a lot of times players were handicapped. They were almost they were handcuffed when a coach has the opportunity to be able to leave for a better opportunity, or somebody comes in and cleans house. All of a sudden, you're playing for a coaching staff that you don't have that connection with, and so I think it's better now. Um, I imagine if I was in the position recruiting today, some of the things I would just be. I really like how Brian Kelly is doing it over at LSU. I mean, he talks about honesty all the time. Like we've got to be honest with our not just our players but our recruits. And so just letting a player know that where they stand right now, and just being upfront, say these are your strengths. These are where we see you coming in and helping us. Right now, you can't help us next year, but we want you to be here. And I think just being upfront and honest with the player is in my opinion, the best way to go because now the player can trust you that you're not just going to hype them up because a lot of these players are having fans and players and coaching staffs and their friends hype them up with everything that they don't know what it's like to be told you're good but you're not great. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
a lot of their respect honesty.
Right, and you saw me when I was coming in. I mean, the generations change. I mean, I remember coming in being told like, "Hey, you're going to be on scout team, bud, and that's the way it's going to be until until you show us, you're ready." But in today's recruiting, I mean, it's an instantaneous society, right? So kids want things like right now. I'm not going to
Yep.
start here. Okay, well, I got to go somewhere else. So, my question for you on that is everyone's journey in the recruiting process is going to be different, right? So if you have a son, if you're a family going through it right now, what are you doing about making sure he picks the right place, giving playing time, make sure the campus is nice? You want him to have a good combination of everything. So how do because you want to have a good football experience, especially if you love the game.
Right.
How do you choose the right school where it's not just about playing time, but honestly just developing as a player?
First off, I'm trying to make sure, like, if I had a son, I'm trying to let them know where can you not only play, but what's going to be a good fit for you. I mean, coaches, we spend sometimes like every day with our players, especially like in the strength staff. You spend so much time from the time you get there, uh, off season, in season, training, everything. So you want to know that as a parent that you're sending your son or you're sending your daughter somewhere where the coaching staff is going to be honest, is going to be a man or woman of integrity. They're going to pour and develop into your child, not just on the field, but academically as a person, what they can contribute into the community. And so that's really what I'm trying to tell the younger generation to look for. Also, I'm trying to look for where can my son and my daughter, where can they go that is going to pay for their college?
Right.
Because loans is something that you just don't want to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably the first
And
main things I'm looking for, and like I said, like a good fit.
I know,
Okay.
you obviously, Steve, you're diehard LSU, playing there and also coaching there, and I mean, I know that. Um, when you were in the program playing and then also coaching, to kind of flip the subject a little bit, what were the top guys within that program doing? The Dwayne Bowe's, right? You played with Dwayne Bowe. I believe you coached,
That's right.
would it have been Tyrann Mathieu at that point when he was younger in his career as a strength coach? Like, you were around some of those guys, like some of the best of the best.
Yeah.
How did they separate themselves in the weight room, on the field, and like from a mindset standpoint? What were some things that you just noticed?
Oh man, with a lot of those guys, whether I played with them or whether I helped coach them in the weight room, they just had a confidence about them. That was probably the number one thing that stood out. They had a confidence, they had a self belief in themselves that they could go out there and they could compete at the highest level. They could
Mm-hmm.
get the job. That nothing was too challenging for them. That
Mm-hmm.
uh, that they just believed in themselves. That was number one. Number two, I think with most every one of the athletes. They came in with a determination. They were ready to work. Most every one of them were coachable. They accepted feedback from the coaches, and they probably were harder on themselves than anybody else could have ever been on them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the guys put in the extra hours. They stayed after practice. They showed up early to practice. Those were the characteristics and the intangibles that a lot of times you don't see on Saturday nights for some of those athletes, is that they are constantly working on their game. You got guys that will go and watch extra film. They'll be asking coaches to open up the doors so they can get a few reps in. To stay later so they can get some extra work in. So just having that mindset of always trying to find somewhere where they can improve.
Right.
Gotcha. No, that's good.
I had a question, Coach. About back to your coaching days. Um, you get a kid on campus, right? And you ask him questions, and you find out he's being recruited, right? He's got an offer from Benedict. He's got an offer from Miles. He's got an
Mm-hmm.
offer from Lane. How come all of a sudden, you and the coaching staff are going to be more likely to go ahead and offer that kid? Like how come when you pick up traction, recruiting becomes easier? Why is it that way?
I think me personally, I started asking questions. What are other schools, what are other coaches seeing in this kid that I missed on? Because I'm not perfect, and maybe I don't have all the game film. Maybe I missed some key plays that the kid made. The one thing that coaches, what we want to do is we want to see an actual game. We want to see a full game because it's easy to see highlights. Because whether it's a highlight tape or for me now, you see in the fitness world, everybody puts the success stories. They see the perfect reps. They see maybe the first set, but they don't see the last set.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is from start to finish? How does that athlete conduct themselves when they're not getting the ball? Do they still go as hard as they can when one of their teammates is when their play is being called? How do they carry themselves off the field, like on the sideline? How are they interacting with their players? Are they picking each other up? How are they interacting with some of the other guys on the or athletes on the other team? So there's a lot of things that a coaching staff will try to evaluate, specifically how it's going to affect their team and their culture, because you don't want somebody who's a great athlete but who's also going to be a bad apple coming in to your program, which you've spent years building, and then somebody to come in and just tear it down.
Right.
So
Culture.
that things that you're looking for. I think recruiting an athlete, you're looking for like a whole game film. You're looking for like how do they carry themselves all the time.
So you're saying when other coaches you see that they're interested, it makes you go back and watch their film. Like, okay, maybe we're missing something. You're saying,
Almost like a double take. They're double taking. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
they can just realize like, hey, listen, is this a player that can actually help us that we missed on? And I think there's also other times where it happens in the flip. You see a lot of other schools going after a player, And you may go back and double down on that, but then you realize that, hey, they don't fit what we're doing here, or we just have too many of these athletes here already. So it's not going to do that athlete any good to bring them on too. So it's not that we wouldn't love to have that athlete here. It's just that we already have 4 or 5 of those same athletes that can do the same intangibles. And so that was probably the other thing that we're looking at. Like, do they bring something different? Are they distinct where they can actually come and help us? Is there a need that they can come in and fill? So there might have been some players that we had passed on just because, receivers, we had a lot of depth when I was there. I think we had also done a good job of developing a lot of the skill players. And so we had to pass on a few guys that other schools were going after pretty hard. But we just realized that, listen, they're going to come in and they're just another body that can do the same thing that the receivers we already have doing. But we had a guy that might come in and may not be as gifted in the receiver role, but they could help us on the kick return. They could help us on the punt return. They could maybe play a little bit wildcat. They could have done some different things that the guys we had couldn't do. And so that, as to why we'd have brought somebody that might not have been as gifted at the receiver position, but they could play the receiver and learn and maybe buy their time for a year or two in that position, but still come in and fill an immediate role somewhere else.
Right. And when you recruit freshmen, do they need certain traits that helps them play faster right away? Do they need certain traits as a recruit that will help them once they get into fall camp and start competing?
I think, and I probably learned this a little bit more now being in the fitness world, as well as the strength and conditioning world. You want to be able to go out there and play fast. All of us can probably think about the game, the time when we were in the zone. And more times than not, we probably weren't thinking about anything. We were just seeing ball, hit ball. We just saw the ball, caught the ball. Everything slowed down for us. But the moment we started thinking about all of these extra different fundamentals and techniques and, our girlfriends in the stands or whatever it may be, that's when we started to think too much. We started to make the game more complex and more complicated than what it already is. Mm-hmm. And so I think any recruit going into your freshman year, you've got to be able to almost delegate the things that you do well. Let your body take over. I mean, we don't think about taking one step after another. We walk, we blink. That's instinctive. So how can learned behavior become instinctive for you to go in there and just have to think about one or two things and just have fun and play the game? You see a guy like Harold Perkins last year, true freshman, and the coaching staff even said, listen, he was such a good athlete, we had to get him on the field, that they simplified his role. And so I think for the athletes and high school recruits now, if you can go to a place and you can find your strength and just let it out every day, just ball out as hard as you can. And then before practice, after practice, find those weak areas, those areas that you need to develop a little bit, spend the time there, but go and compete at a high level. And if you make a mistake, hey, you make a mistake, but make a mistake going 100%, right?
Right.
And learn from that. Go make up for it. Go fix that mistake, when you can on your off time.
And to piggyback off that, coach, so, freshmen, right? They have a lot of challenges stacked up against them. You're coming from high school as a high school recruit. You don't know what to expect in college, so it's understandable. What if you could give advice? What are some things when you were the strength coach at LSU, seeing kids work out every day? What are some things that lead to failure for them? Like, what are some things that they don't do enough or do too much that causes them not to succeed?
I think bodybuilding. I think trying to look good. Mm-hmm. Like you're in the weight room, you want the muscles to pop, but are they going to benefit and are they going to carry over to the movement patterns that you need for your sport? So speaking for football, you need to not be able to run that 40-yard dash. Somebody who can run a 4.3 is great, but can they run 4.3 going back and forth? Can they stop on a dime and change directions? Can they open hips? There might be some guys who run 4.7, but they play 4.7 in all different directions. So you may look good, but you may not be able to play as good as you look.
Right.
And so that's the thing that's hurting a lot that are great is that they look the part, but they don't want to be developed in all 360 degrees of of the playing field.
Right.
So to add to that, I was going to ask you that earlier. Let's say your son or daughter's going through it right now. They want to be as high level of an athlete as they can, whatever that is. They want to go play in college. Okay. What would be your general advice to find them a movement specific, sports specific weight program? What would you do? Like just from the physical side of things, and obviously mental, comes into that. But from a physical athletic development, you're talking to 1,000 parents right now. There'll probably be several thousand families that listen to this. Their son's in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. Let's say they're in 8th grade. What are some of the basic things that you can do to prepare your body, not just to be a guy or a girl that is fast, but one that actually is applicable to their specific sport and position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think finding a coach who understands the human body. I'm not going to train somebody who's a football player. I'm not going to train them the same way that I would a volleyball player. I'm not going to train them as a baseball player. Baseball has a lot of rotation. There's a lot of leg power that goes through that, whereas football has a lot of explosive power. So I'm trying to find somebody who's going to, train my son and my daughter in the movement patterns that are going to transfer over to the specific sport that they're playing. So if I have a football player who's a receiver, well, they're going to have some pretty good shoulders. They're going to have to reach over their head. They're going to have to definitely rotate. Obviously, some linear speed, but they're going to have to learn how to stop and start, cut on a dime. That's going to be different training an offensive lineman. So I want to make sure that whoever I send my son or daughter to aren't just going to have a broad umbrella and say, one size fits all.
One size fits all, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, good, man. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. We really do. Just giving different families different insight. I think your perspective is unique because you've done the recruiting. You've also been a part of a strength staff at one of the best programming institutions in the world. And so we really appreciate your insight and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. We really do. Thank you.
You guys having me. Thank you. It's been good to see you guys, and keep working hard.
All right.
Absolutely.